Official street skateboarding contests date as far back as the mid-early 1960s, when Makaha Skateboards hosted the alleged first freestyle and slalom competition in Southern California. Fast forward over half a century, and competitive skateboarding is internationally recognized as an Olympic sport. Americans understandably dominated competitive skateboarding in the sport's infancy, given the initial commercial boom of the activity originating in the US, but Japanese men and women, particularly in street contests in the last 3 years, have shown more growth than any other country in terms of the percentage of total earnings won each year, while American men and women are showing significant drops in the same category. In today's street contest circuit, the Olympics are now one of, if not the most important event to qualify for if you're a street contest skater. Unlike the first ever Olympic street skate contest in Tokyo, non-world skate events like SLS and X Games are no longer considered applicable qualifying events for the 2024 Olympics. Therefore, Olympic hopeful street skaters have their eye on world skate sanctioned events. Currently, the US leads all countries in terms of having the most skaters on the World Skate Rankings board for a combined men's, women's, street, and park total at 44, with Brazil second at 42 and Japan third with 35. Within those same parameters, France leads all other countries with an average placing of 35 when you take the average overall ranking of men's and women's street and park placings. A more important metric is average placing per skater. In other words, which country is getting the best performance on average from each of their respective competitors. For men's and women's street and park, the US leads the ranking as far as having the best placing on average per skater at world skate events, while also having the most skaters occupying both lists. However, comparing overall men's, women's street park isn't the only way to look at what countries are performing well leading up to Paris 2024. Japan is first in both men's and women's street when it comes to average placing per skater. Using an index to measure this performance indicator for the men, Japan's 11 skaters occupy an average placing of 4.35 on the street rankings, which is the best metric on the World Skate Leaderboard, compared to any other country. The 10 Japanese women representing their home country occupy an even higher placing of 2.48 on their respective leaderboard, beating out second place Australia by more than 1 index point, while the men's race in the same category is relatively tighter. For the men, second place Brazil is only 0.16 away from Japan in average placing per skater on World Street Rankings, and third place US is 0.83 away from Japan. The Olympics are important for most top-level athletes, but there are many other street skateboarding competitions held around the world that financially reward street skaters and don't get as much coverage. These smaller events should be taken into consideration, along with other big-name contests like Dew Tour, X Games, SLS, and World Skate, when trying to identify which countries are leading competitive street skateboarding. TheBorder.com is likely home to the site of today's most comprehensive competitive skateboarding database, with information tracking the performance of over 30,000 unique rider profiles in both BMX and skateboarding. Yearly global street skateboarding rankings list for men and women date back to 2015 on the Border's website, with an average of 2,300 skaters ranked per year through mid-2023. In the time span of 2015 through mid-2023, over 12.8 thousand unique male and female skaters have found themselves on at least one of the yearly rankings lists. In order to earn yourself a spot on the Borders list, you need to place at least in the top 20 of a publicly published competition, which will in turn give you points. The skater with the most points leads the rankings list. For example, 2019 happened to be the year when the most points were distributed across men and women, totaling nearly 507,000. Nyjah Huston made up 9.5 thousand of those points, leading the men's rankings in 2019, and those points were earned from him placing in the top 20 of 14 separate events, which includes semifinal placings. The Border also logs earnings that are publicized, which don't always move in lockstep with points. For example, 2019 was the year when the most points were awarded, but 2015 was the overwhelming leader in annual contest earnings, with 1.8 million accounted for in prize money. Brazil's Luan Oliveira Oliveira led in points in 2015 with 11.4 thousand, and also took home nearly $275,000 in contest money from 22 major event appearances. Back when Street League was doling out a cool $100,000 per stop to each winner, 2 of which Luan won, first in LA in July, then a month later in New Jersey. Although Oliveira led the points rankings in 2015, Kelvin Hoefler was the earnings leader in that same year, banking $355,000 from his 14 contest appearances, and it just so happens that this is the most contest money earned in a year by a skater in the last decade, according to the Borders data, mainly thanks to Hoefler enjoying a $200,000 payday after winning Street League in Chicago in October, as well as a hell of a lucrative $100,000 weekend in mid-August from his double wins in the Do Tour LA Street and Street Style events. Brazil's Pamela Rosa and Raíssa Leal are tied for first with most money earned by a woman in a single year at $120,000, first by Rosa in 2019, then Leal in 2023. But given we're only halfway through 2023 at the time of this edit, Raíssa will likely be setting a new earnings record for the women. American male skaters have historically dominated the combined men's and women's prize money earnings for street competitions, earning almost 49% of the total $9.76 million awarded from 2015 through mid-2023. Nyjah makes up 33.5% of that U.S. statistic and is the only skater in the last 9 years to breach the $1 million mark from straight contest prize money at over $1.15 million. Kelvin from Brazil is the second highest earner in the same period with over $700,000, and Yuto Horigome from Japan is third at $443,000. The second highest earning American male skater after Nyjah is Dashawn Jordan, whose $188,000 in winnings from 2015 to today is only 16% of what Houston has raked in over the same time frame. To give a sense of how saturated the American footprint is on international street skateboarding competitions, the US makes up over 57% of all 13.7 thousand ranked profiles during the span of 2015 through now, and Australia is the second most represented country, followed by Mexico in third at just under 4% to round out the top 3. Based on the dominant volume of American male and female skaters in street contests, it's not too surprising to see that they've taken home a combined total of just over 40% of the $9.76 million in purse prize money from competition results tracked from 2015 through 2023. On the women's side, the US is third in total earnings by country, with female street contest skaters cashing in on just over $500,000 in the last 9 years, which is 19% of the $2.68 million total awarded to the women. Mariah Duran is the top U.S. earner for the ladies, snagging herself $137,000, mainly from a couple big X Games wins in 2018, as well as a highly productive and prolific contest circuit performance in 2019. Brazil is the leading country in contest money earnings for women, with their 86 skaters earning a combined $1.05 million in the last 9 years, led by Raíssa's $362,000, but followed closely by Pamela Rosa's $357,000, before steeply dropping by $100K to Leticia Buffoni's $261,000. Remember that stat about Luan having the most points in 2015, but Kelvin actually taking home the most money that same year? Similar to that stat, on the women's side, Brazil ranks first in earnings, but ranks second in total points earned, trailing the US by about 80,000 points. So what does that mean? It depends on multiple factors, but at face value, one oversimplified conclusion could be that Brazil being the top street contest earners on the women's side means their relatively smaller pool of riders are performing better than any other country at the biggest events, like Street League, Do Tour, and X Games, while the comparatively bloated roster of 1,025 American female skaters are attending and competing in more contests overall. Because of the better representation, US female street contest skaters are more likely to be placing in the top 20, scoring more points, but not necessarily competing well enough to be in the top 5 at the biggest contests, as evidenced by their third-place rankings and earnings, taking home half of what first-place Brazil women earn and 75% of second-place Japan, who, similar to Brazil, have a relatively minuscule roster of only 116 women riders, which is basically 9 times smaller than the US ladies roster. For the men, and mainly because of what we've already found out about Nyjah Huston, the US is the world leader in earnings and points for competitive street skateboarding in the last 9 years, with the 3.4 million earned by the boys from the land of the free accounting for just under 50% of the $7 million in cash earned by all male skaters for that same time frame. Second place Brazil has walked away with $1.4 million, which is 40% of what the first place US men have earned, and third place is Japan at $660,000, 65% of which is from Yuto's earnings alone. For both men and women, 96 countries have been represented by at least one street skater in the form of a top 20 finish at a publicly recognized contest in the last 9 years, but only 8.3% of those countries can claim they've been able to take home at least an average of 1% of total earnings in that period. The Netherlands have maintained an annual average of 1.14% of the total combined earnings for men and women's street skateboarding prize money, with Candy Jacobs accounting for 57% of her country's total earnings for the past decade at nearly $68,000. Portugal, Canada, and France are all above 2% in annual average earnings compared to the total earnings, but are below 3%, while Australia ranks 4th at 5.66%, with Shane O'Neill's $368,000 in contest money accounting for 64% of the Outback's total. Japan has averaged 15% of all contest earnings from 2015 through May 2023, ranking 3rd overall across men's and women's street skateboarding. During that same period, Brazil has historically earned an average of a little over 23% of total annual earnings, and the US leads with 42.6% of the combined men's and women's street skateboarding contest money earned. For women, 7 countries have been able to take home at least 1% of all contest earnings per year on average since 2015. Austria has averaged just over 1% of annual contest earnings, and Julia Bruckler's $17,000 accounts for 89% of the country's prize money. The Philippines, Netherlands, and Australia each fall within a range of 2 to 4% of the total annual women's contest earnings in the last decade, and Japan cracks the top 3 at nearly 23%, followed by the US at 25.68%, and Brazil leads with 37.29%. This same metric on the men's side finds 7 countries that have maintained at least 3% of the total average annual earnings per year, with a value disparity of over 2% between Canada, the 7th country who made the cut at just over 3%, and Argentina, the 8th ranked country whose average annual share of the total men's international contest earnings is less than 0.75%. Portugal, France, and Australia averaged between 4% to a little over 5% of all the yearly men's street contest money since 2015, and like the women, Japanese men are 3rd with taking home over 12% of the total average annual earnings awarded. Unlike the women, Brazil trails the men's U.S. competitive street skateboarders in the average total annual contest earnings by over 30%, with Brazil accounting for 17.5% and America hogging nearly a full 50% of yearly contest money on average since 2015. U.S. representation of street skateboarding for men and women outnumbers the combined total of the 95 other countries by over 2,000 skaters, meaning that if you add up all the non-American men and women skaters who've placed at least top 20 in a publicly recognized contest, you get
5,437.
And the US alone has nearly
7,400
riders. Less than 3.4% of those 7,800 US skaters have placed well enough at a contest to win money in the last 9 years, which ranks America 34th out of the 43 prize money earning countries around the world, for men and women combined, in terms of the likelihood that you'll skate well enough at a contest to win some cash. Over 55% of the 96 countries don't have any skaters who've been able to place well enough at a street competition in the last 9 years to win money. And only 9 countries have a lower percentage of contest money earning skaters versus total skaters that's above 0% than the US, with South Africa currently sitting at the lowest percentage of 0.31%, with one of its 318 skaters winning contest money, thanks to Moses Adams getting 16th at the 2015 Kimberly Diamond Cup Street World Championships qualifiers. It's true that this particular set of data should be taken with a grain of salt, considering the countries leading this list, like Latvia, Uruguay, and the Dominican Republic, to name a few, each have less than 10 skaters, so their percentage of earners will naturally be higher. But if you consider countries with a combined men's and women's roster of at least 100 riders, Brazil and Japan each have a much higher portion of their skaters taking home contest money than America, with the former two countries each sitting above 15% compared to America's sub 3.5%, and Japan is over 27%. To be fair to the women, the lower percentage of American skaters entering contests and not placing well enough to earn money is relatively more skewed towards the men's side, where only 2.8% of the 7,200 US male riders have been able to skate competitively enough for cash, which places them 6th out of the 14 countries with a roster of at least 100 unique male skaters who've been able to take home more than $0 in a street contest since 2015. Percentages are comparatively healthier on the US women's side, with over 9.6% of the 614 female skaters performing competitively enough for cash, but after scaling in proportion with the men's roster sizes, 12 other countries with at least 10 unique female skaters on their roster lead the American women, and Canada, Brazil, and Japan are all able to guarantee nearly 30% or more of their skaters are earning contest money if they compete, with Japan being nearly a 50-50 shot. Competitive US male street skaters have the highest average annual percentage of contest earnings since 2015 compared to any other country, at 49.6%. But when you take a look at the yearly change for that same measure, America is also the most volatile country. In 2015 and 2016, the US men saw over 10% growth in the annual average percent of all money earned in street contests, hoarding nearly 48% in 2015, then 58.6% in 2016, and leading the world both years. 2017 saw even more growth from the American boys, with a 4% increase in percentage of all contest money reaching nearly 63%, which is the highest single percentage of all annual street contest money captured by any country for both men and women in a single non-pandemic year, totaling $637,850. In 2018, however, the US men's share of international contest money plummeted from 63% to just over 38%, a 25% decrease, although still leading the world, while Japan, mainly from Yuto, grew 13% in earnings taken from the yearly total to just under 20% of all money taken home by a single country, the latter of whom won 2 SLS stops and the Do Tour Long Beach contest in 2018, giving Horigome a handsome $143,000 in strictly base contest prize money. A year later, the American homies were able to secure a 2% increase from 2018, still leading all other countries in total share of contest money at over 40%. But it's worth mentioning that the size of the pie itself shrank for the 5th consecutive year since 2015 to $770,000 for the whole year, which is damn near $1 million less than 2015's $1.65 million earned by male street contest skaters worldwide. 2020 coincided with everything shutting down, which kind of skews the perspective of the US absolutely dominating 93% of all contest money that year, because while 93% is a large share, the total amount of $149,000 in cash awarded in 2020 was only 2% of the combined total amount of money awarded from 2015 through 2023. In other words, yeah, the US men took home almost all of the contest money awarded in 2020, but there wasn't much to take home, because one Japan-based Chimera contest in January was basically the only big purse contest that year, which Nyjah won, and after looking at the contest video, Yuto's second place finish actually gave him about $15K of the $100,000 purse from that event. With the world reopening public events in 2021, the US men would suffer a significant 38% drop in total share of contest earnings that year compared to 2020, but still leading for the 7th year in a row at 55%. 2022 saw another drop in the size of the American men's slice of the biggest piece of the street contest prize money pie, falling 17% from 2021 to a 38% share in 2022, which was also the year when Nyjah tore his ACL. But no other country had a bigger slice than the US men for the 8th consecutive year. Halfway through 2023, for the first time since 2015, the US men are not the world leader in overall share of contest earnings, sitting fourth at under 12%. While it's true that at the time of this edit, we're still looking at several big street skate events like SLS stops and World Skate qualifiers, for the first time, maybe ever, the future of US men dominating street skateboarding contests appears to be in jeopardy. Japan might be sitting third worldwide for average overall share of contest earnings for the last 9 years at 12.2%, but the Japanese men have an average growth rate of over 3.5% each year, which is the highest of any country, while the US men have the lowest year-on-year growth on average, decreasing over 4.5% on average since 2015. And if you exclude the unconventional 2020 stat, the US men have been losing an average of 8.4% of the share of total contest earnings over the past 9 years. On the women's side, the story is somewhat similar, with American women losing an average of 5.8% of the total share of contest winnings per year to lead the loss rankings, while Japanese women have enjoyed the highest average growth in annual share of total contest money at 5%. Brazilian women have remained pretty consistent in maintaining a nearly perfectly steady chokehold in leading the share of total contest winnings per year, but for both men and women, the decline in America's share of total contest winnings, along with Japan's rise via the relatively fastest growing slice of the contest money pie, Japan could be the country to look out for as a potential new world leader in competitive street skateboarding. For the men, America ranks 7th overall amongst countries with the highest average contest earnings per monetized skater since 2015 at $16,700, meaning that if you're a competitive street skater representing the US and you've at least won some money in the last 9 years, you're statistically expected to be making an average of $16,700 in that time frame. But that's only if you're good enough to be amongst the 2.8% of the 7,200 US male skaters that have earned contest money in that time. Australian men rank 6th overall with 2.72% of the country's 882 street contest skaters earning an average of $18.6K over the last decade, followed by Puerto Rico in 5th with 1% of its 89 riders, aka Manny Santiago, making an average 9-year contest prize money total of $19,800. Frenchmen are 4th, while Japanese men are 3rd, with 16.5% of its 139 money-winning riders earning $30,200 in a 9-year time span on average. Brazil ranks 2nd overall for the dudes, with 13% of its 279 male street contest skaters earning almost $40,000 in prize money on average over a 9-year period, while Portugal leads the men's rankings with 3 of their 20 riders taking home about $41,500. Brazilian women lead the rankings of highest average earnings over a 9-year time frame per female rider that has placed well enough to earn money, with the 37.5% of their 40 female riders winning at least some street contest cash over the last 9 years, taking home an average of $70.6K per skater over a 9-year time frame, with the Netherlands in 2nd at $27,500 and Japan in 3rd at $20,100 earned on average. American women rank 7th overall under that same metric, with 9.6% of the 614 riders with a historically successful contest career earning just under $9,500 in the last 9 years, while Austria, Australia, and the Philippines lead the US in addition to the aforementioned top 3 Netherlands, Japan, and Brazil. So what does all of this mean? Well, one thing to take into consideration is that the contest earnings from the Borders database shouldn't be treated as the only income source from men and women doing well at competitive street events, because sponsors will likely offer performance incentives, which will increase the amount of money street contest skaters are taking home, along with board sales, shoe deals, and other lucrative partnerships that bring street contest skaters money. However, those figures are not publicly disclosed, and they likely vary by sponsor and skater, so the base contest earnings are the most transparent metric to use for comparing the performances of international competitive street skaters. From doing this exercise, it paints a clear picture that shows how incredibly unlikely you are, on average, male or female, to have a financially comfortable street contest career. There are some countries for the women, including Brazil, Japan, and the Philippines, where if you skate a contest, you're at least around 40% or more likely to win yourself some cash, but the amounts are modest at best. These average earnings amounts are based on the total cash prizes in a 10-year time frame. So even though Brazilian women have the highest average total earnings of $70.6 thousand per skater, that total needs to be divided by the 9-year time frame to get an annual earnings of barely more than $7,000. $7,000 a year from contest wins is not exactly an attractive amount for aspiring skaters looking for a career in international competitive street contests, and that figure is based on the Brazilian women, who have the highest average 9-year earnings total in the world out of any country, including the men. For every Raisa Leal and Nyjah Huston, there are over 12.3 thousand skaters in the last 9 years who have competed in a contest but weren't able to make more than $0 at an event. Only 544 of the 12,869 unique skaters from around the world who've entered a publicly published competitive street contest in the last 9 years are able to say that they won at least some money for their performance. That's only 4.2% of skaters around the world winning cash at a street contest over a 9-year time frame. While this sounds like a depressing statistic, the relatively less than stellar monetary amounts for street skating contests are not that surprising, considering the general perception of skateboarding as being more of a fun, artistic expression than strictly a way to measure skills. Further complicating the idea of skateboarding as a sport is the fact that your performance is based entirely on the heavily subjective and sometimes fragmented collective decision that comes from a panel of human judges. Unlike ball sports, where you generally win a game by putting a round object in a net or past a certain distance more often than your opponent, street skateboarding competitors are at the mercy of judges who base your score on several subjective categories. Trick difficulty is important, but so is style, as well as trick variety and how strategically you use a given contest's course, which changes with every competition. As we've discovered, Japanese men and women are part of the fastest growing country in terms of annual share of street skateboarding contest earnings. And with Yuto and Nishiya both winning men's and women's gold at the last Olympics in Tokyo, not only is it likely that competitive skateboarding will continue to gain worldwide public interest, but Japan could very well be the country that is home to the best contest skaters internationally very soon. Nyjah is 28 years old at the time of this edit, and that's a couple years older than the average age of street contest skaters, but he bounces back well from injury and may even continue to skate competitively and place high in big skate events for 5 or more years from now. However, once Nyjah and his $1 million in contest earnings are out of the picture for the US, America can basically kiss their status as the leading country for street skateboarding on a competitive level goodbye if the nation doesn't find a replacement for Houston. And with relatively young Japanese superstars like Jinwoo Anadara making waves on the world stage, Japan is not to be underestimated.